Good morning, everyone. The webinar will begin in 5 minutes. While waiting, I do encourage you to download the handout that's available under the Handouts tab on the control panel. You can download that and take notes on today's presentation. While we are waiting for the webinar to begin, we do have Christy Frieden with us. Christy, strengths-based leadership is a popular topic. Before we begin your presentation, what are some additional resources available to learn more about the subject?
Yes, good morning, everybody. So there are several different books that have been out for quite a while and ones that I have utilized both to pull information from, but also to take different assessments. I utilize them when I do individual coaching, executive coaching, helps teams understand each other a little bit better. So I did want to just highlight a couple of the books that I continually utilize. The first one, and is one that I'll be utilizing throughout the presentation today, is the book StrengthsFinder 2.0 by Tom Rath. Now, this book has been around for quite a while. I think it was published in 2007. But this is, if you haven't taken a strengths assessment, this is where I would start. There's just a lot of great information in this book and in the assessment that you can really learn about yourself. Essentially, you go online, you take an assessment. If you get the book, if there's a code, you go online, you take the assessment, and you get a report of your top 5 themes, strengths themes, they call it. And so that's and I think there's a total of 34 themes. So you get your top 5, you get a wonderful report about your top 5, the combination of those, and a lot of other great information. So to start, if you're looking for somewhere to begin and you want to get to know more about yourself, I would certainly look at the StrengthsFinder 2.0 by Tom Rath. There are also some additional books based off of that book. So if you are in a leadership role, there's a book called Strengths-Based Leadership by Tom Rath and Barry Conchie. So that was written about a year after StrengthsFinder 2.0. And what it essentially does is take a look at 4 categories. So those 34 themes from StrengthsFinder are then grouped into 4 leadership categories. And the 4 categories are executing, influencing, relationship building, and strategic thinking. And so the way that they divide up the 34 themes in StrengthsFinder, then they categorize it in these 4 categories, and they really focus on looking at you as a leader. So that's another great insight if you're trying to understand yourself and your strengths related to leadership specifically. Strengths-based leadership is a fantastic resource. And I've utilized that with leadership teams together. And it really is an eye-opening team building exercise to see where all the leadership strengths fall on a team, and then know who to tap for different projects, different activities, different ways forward for the leadership team.
Great.
Yeah. So, and then a side note on that StrengthsFinder, there is just for all of you who have teenagers, there is a StrengthsFinder for teens. So it's called Clifton Strengths for Students. So it's a StrengthsFinder assessment just for teens and young adults. So that's another great one. I had my daughter do that. So nice. It's helped her. I think it's helped her. I don't know. Maybe she just humored me through it. But she is now a freshman at John Carroll, and she's in a leadership program there, and they actually made them also do the StrengthsFinder 2.0. So it's a pretty popular assessment.
Nice. Okay. Well, we are right at 11, so we'll get started. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Strengths-Based Leadership. Since we want to continue to deliver these informational webinars for you and practice social distancing, we are delivering this webinar remotely. Your presenter, Christy Frieden, will be presenting from her office and me from mine. My name is Patrick Allen. I'm the Program Manager for Kent State Center for Corporate and Professional Development's Public Open Enrollment Programs. Our center specializes in providing employee development for partnering organizations in Northeast Ohio and around the world. We offer training as both public open enrollment programs currently being delivered live and virtually via Zoom, and also customized programs delivered live and virtual or at your location. I am joined today by Kent State facilitator Christy Frieden. I will be serving as your host, and Christy will be our presenter for today. Christy specializes in motivating, training, and coaching professionals, supervisors, managers, and executives in areas of leadership, customer service, emotional intelligence, and employee engagement. She has over 17 years of healthcare management experience, most recently working for Cleveland Hospital as a manager of performance management and then as an organizational and performance development specialist. Her background includes extensive facilitator training with GE Healthcare Solutions as it relates to selecting, developing, coaching, evaluating, and promoting top performers. She attained the Development Leadership through Emotional Intelligence Certificate from Case Western Reserve's Weatherhead School of Management. She also holds a bachelor's degree from Slippery Rock University and a master's from West Virginia University in vocational counseling. Her passion and dynamic presentation style, as well as her down-to-earth attitude, engages and motivates her audience to focus on their strengths and achieve personal and professional success. For Kent State, Christy facilitates programs such as effective organizational leadership, understanding emotional intelligence, managing transition and embracing change during challenging times, and the ROI of happiness. Everyone in attendance today has been muted to avoid background noise from any of the over 150 registered participants. We do encourage you to ask questions at any point during the hour. You can submit your questions in writing using the questions tab on the control panel on the right side of your screen. I will present your questions to Christy as time permits throughout the hour. There is a handout available to you that summarizes today's presentation. It's located under the Handouts tab on the control panel. We encourage you to download it and take notes during today's presentation. We are recording today's webinar, and you will receive an email next week with a link to the recording after we conclude our time together. And now I'd like to introduce Christy Frieden.
Well, thank you very much, Patrick. That was quite an introduction. And welcome, everybody. Today, talking about leading through strengths, and just the whole topic of strengths is really, I find it to be particularly engaging. It really is a valuable way of approaching leadership and supervision. So today in our webinar, the objectives are, I'd like you to understand the importance of leading through strengths, identifying your individual strengths and why that's so important, and developing those strengths, and then recognizing the strengths in others and how to have meaningful strengths-based dialogue. So that's what we'll be covering in the next hour. So I have a polling question for you right off the bat. So if you could put your answers in. The question is, at work, I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day. So if you can select one of these: A, strongly agree; B, agree; C, disagree; or D, strongly disagree. At work, I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day.
Okay, the polling question is open. I'll give you a little bit of time here to answer it, and then I will show the results.
So this question was posed it was a study done by the Gallup organization. It was posed over 10 million people. So want to see what we have here in our audience today, what the answers are.
Okay, well, it looks like just about everybody has voted. And looks like strongly agree is 18%, agree at 65%, disagree at 15%, and strongly disagree at 2%.
Okay, all right, excellent. Well, I'm happy to hear that a majority of the people strongly agree or agree. So what they have come up with, the Gallup organization says, if you agree with that statement, agree or strongly agree with that statement, you are 6 times more likely to be engaged in your work, and you're 3 times more likely to have a better quality of life in general. So it really is important that you're able to utilize your strengths every single day. It's it's interesting though that when they took a look at this survey, this 10 million people that they did, only a third of the people strongly agreed with this statement. So, it's really important that we not only choose every day to focus on our strengths and utilize them, but then if we're in leadership roles, we promote this idea. We promote this idea for having people utilize their strength every day. It really is a contributing factor to engagement. And now with, some of the challenges with working remotely and all those things, promoting engagement any way we can is really, really important. So thank you for sharing your answers to that question. Okay, so when we talk about the whole idea of strengths, we first need to at least acknowledge that oftentimes we have a focus on weaknesses, or certainly a focus on what's going wrong. And think about this. It starts when we're young. An interesting statistic, 77% of parents in the United States think that the lowest grades on the report card deserve the most attention. So let me read that again. 77% of parents in the United States think that the lowest grades on the report card deserve the most attention. And I have to admit, I was one of those parents at one point in my life. I have 2 daughters. One's in college and one's in high school. But back in the day, I remember my daughter one time came home with a report card in 5th grade, I think it was. And she had all A's and B's and then a big fat D in math. So what do you think my first response was looking at this report card? Of course, I zeroed right in on the D and started, giving her a hard time. How could you get a D in math? And in my mind thinking, now we got to get the tutor. We got to, all the things that we have to do in order to increase that, bring that D up. And I didn't acknowledge her A's and B's at all on that report card, looking back on it. It was just really zeroed in on the D. And then we take that mentality, throughout into the work environment. And as we're doing performance evaluations, oftentimes we're focused on what they're not doing well or what they can improve on. And then we go into the development plan focused on, everywhere that they have to improve. And so it's just a mentality that we have, or we think about our organizations and everything that they're doing wrong, or everything that we could, we compare ourselves to other organizations and, if we could just improve in this area or this area. So we're focused oftentimes on deficits. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about strengths and weaknesses and how, how we can think about them. Now, I'm not suggesting that you can completely ignore weaknesses. But what I would say is that when you think about competency, competency that people have to have in their positions, or being competent in, let's say, a class in school, you have to have a certain level of skill to meet competency, okay? If you fall below that competency, then yes, you have to put some effort in weaknesses to at least get in order to be competent in a skill. But once you've reached competency, then I would suggest focusing on strengths. And I have this sailboat here to highlight what I mean by that. So if you think about the sailboat, let's say there's holes in the boat. Let's say there's holes in the boat. So those holes represent weaknesses. Certainly we have to put our effort into plugging up the holes, because if we don't do that, then the boat sinks. But even if we plugged up the holes and we didn't open up our sails meaning our strength. So let's just say we plugged up the holes, but we kept the sails down, we wouldn't really go anywhere, okay? We'd just be, floating there. It's our strength, our sails. We open up our sails, we let the wind catch the sails, and that's really what moves us forward. All right, that really is what moves us forward and helps us to achieve what we want to achieve. So think about that your strengths are like sails in a sailboat, and certainly we plug our weaknesses, we plug those holes, we get to be at a certain level of competence, but it's those sails that open up and really get us to where we need to be. Everyone has a unique basket of gifts. Everyone is unique. Everyone has different strengths. Everyone approaches situations differently. And what we need to do is really try to understand what our gifts are, what our talents that we are born with, because everyone is born with certain talents and strengths. So we don't want to waste our time comparing ourselves to other people, wishing we had this strength or this talent or that talent. What we need to do is spend time figuring out what we're really good at and developing those things, because that is our destiny, that's our edge at work. That's when we can really shine and excel. So getting to know your own unique basket of gifts is a worthwhile endeavor. And then as a leader, it's certainly worthwhile to help your employees figure that out as well. So I'd like to just give you just a few moments to think about, what are your gifts? What are your strengths? And the way we think about that is just by answering this scenario or these questions. So you recall a time when you were at your best. So think about a time when you were at your best, either in the work environment or even in the home environment or out in the community, a time when you really felt like you were at your best. Where were you? What were you doing? You got to be as specific as possible. How did you feel when you were doing it? And what was the benefit to you and to others? So I just want you to reflect on that for a moment. When you were at your best, where were you? What were you doing? How did you feel? And what was the benefit to you or others? So this is the beginning of trying to figure out, what your special strengths are. And what I would recommend is always trying to think about, when did you really feel kind of on top of things? You felt good. You were successful in whatever you were doing. And that would be an indication that could be a strength of yours. So always keep that in mind. This is where we begin when we're trying to understand ourselves and where our strengths may lie. So what happens when we focus on our strengths? This is when we see success happen. This is where we experience enormous growth and development. And then this is where we get those bursts of energy and happiness. And here's the thing, what you focus on grows. Oftentimes we're just focused on what's not right, what we could be doing better, what we're failing at, what our weaknesses are. And unfortunately, when you're focused there, it's easy to fall into negativity. But when you're focused on your strengths, we want to grow that. We want to grow the knowledge we have of our strengths, and we want to keep developing those strengths, and we want to find more and more opportunities to develop. If we focus on weaknesses, we're going to get more of that, more negativity, more just feeling that we're not measuring up. So we really want to try to flip the script, choose the right mindset, and focus on our strengths and what's going well in a situation. And what they say, I mean, there's so much research about strengths and what they say about it. So when you talk about strengths, what do they do for us? They help us to do our very best. This is where we get the greatest sense of meaning. This is where we really enjoy life to the fullest. It's where we find that deeper sense of connection with the world around us. And it really does increase our satisfaction in all domains of our lives. So in every domain, it helps us to be the best that we can possibly be. So what is a strength? According to Tom Rath, now he is the author of StrengthsFinder 2.0. He spells out a formula: T times I equals S. So this is what he says. So he calls it a talent. So when you take the StrengthsFinder 2.0, you'll find that you're going to come up with a talent, a theme. So he defines that as a natural way of thinking, feeling, and behaving. So that's what he determines as a talent. Times the investment. So it's the time spent practicing, developing your skills, and building your knowledge base in that particular area. And what he ultimately then says is that's your strength, the ability to consistently provide near perfect performance. So just like a sport, you know, I guess I'll give my daughter as an example. So, you know, as she was growing up, we tried every different activity or sport. You know, we were in soccer. She did martial arts for a while. I think we tried basketball. We did dance. I mean, and I'm sure those of you who are parents and can relate to, you know, as they're growing up, trying to have them figure out, you know, really what they love. And as a matter of fact, I really like martial arts, and for a while I was dragging them to martial arts because that's something that I really liked. But then, you know, they ultimately find what they really love. And so my younger daughter, well, they both ended up playing volleyball, but my younger daughter now, she's in high school, she loves volleyball. I mean, she will play it any opportunity she gets all through the year. We're doing it in school, then we're doing it in club, then we're doing sand volleyball in the summertime. I mean, she loves it so much. So it's like she has that innate skill or talent for it, but now she's put in a lot of time and investment, and so she's pretty darn good at it, you know, so much so that we're looking at maybe hopefully having her play in college somewhere. But you can think about that in terms of a sport or a skill like that. But even like those things that you do at work, those activities that you really think you're pretty darn good at. Maybe you're really good at accounting or creating, you know, charts or graphs, or maybe you're really good at presenting information or influencing, or you're really good at sales. I mean, if you really find that it's a talent of yours, put that investment in to really make it a full-fledged strength. So another way as we think about determining our strengths is we need to look for the signs. And signs, the acronym SIGNS: success, instinct, growth, and need. So success, when you do it, you feel effective. Instinct, before you do it, you actively look forward to it. growth, while you're doing it, you feel inquisitive and focused. And then N for need. After you've done it, you feel fulfilled and authentic. You know that you've really done something that is worthwhile to you and you're pretty darn good at it. And so we think about strong moments and weak moments. So this also gives us an indication that we're either in our strength zone or maybe we're not. So when we're experiencing a strength, that those strong moments, we feel powerful, confident. You know, it's natural, it's authentic. Things like, oh, that was easy, or that was awesome, or when can I do that again? You're looking forward to it. And on the flip side of that is those weak moments. And the weak moments are, you know, I feel drained, time's going by slowly, I can't concentrate, it's frustrating, you know, you feel wiped out during and after, you're, you know, irritated by it, you're bored, or heck, why can't the new person do this? Okay, and you know, and every job has obviously times when we feel like this, and so you can't be in a job where you're always in those strong moments, and you have to understand that. But trying to find more strong moments than weak moments is probably the success, or the key to success. So when you're feeling those draining type things, that's when you realize you're kind of out of that strong moment and more into something that's really not your strength. You know, it's kind of like when you think about the strong moments, it's that flow, that state of flow when you feel like you're in the zone, when time goes by really quickly because you're so engrossed in what you're doing. And it's ultimately what it is there's a level of stress involved and a level of competency. And when that stress, good stress, and competency meet, you find yourself in that state of flow, or that zone feeling, which is so good. And you know, think about hobbies that you have or things that you really enjoy doing. That'll probably give you also an indication that that's, you know, when you're in that state of flow, or you're in the zone. It's a way of knowing that it's a strength. Okay, now I do want to mention what we need to watch out for as far as being supervisors and trying to identify the strengths of other people. And here it is. Just because someone is good at something doesn't necessarily mean it's a strength. I want to say that again. Just because someone's good at something doesn't necessarily mean it's a strength. So let that sit, you know, soak in for a second. I'm sure you have examples where you're probably pretty good at something, but it just sucks the life out of you. And I remember at one point when I worked for the hospital, I was in charge of the HR standards for the accrediting body that would come in and, you know, survey our hospital and make sure we were on the right track. And so every so often I had to be put in charge of making sure that we were all, we were following rules and regulations according to the HR standards of these accrediting bodies. And it was a pretty big job. And I just hated it. I mean, I must have been pretty good at it because we would pass our surveys and I would get this job responsibility every single time we had a survey, but it really did just suck the life out of me. I couldn't stand doing it, but I did it. So just keep that in mind. Just because someone that, you know, one of your employees is really good at something, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's a strength. And so the question becomes, how do we know? How do we know if it's a strength or not? So the first thing that you have to be aware of when you're trying to determine whether it's a strength of somebody's is, how do we spot that? And so a way to do that, typically when someone's performing something that falls in their strength zone, some of these behaviors you might see. So a rising inflection in their voice, rapid speech, maybe better, more confident posture, wide eyes or raised eyebrows when they're talking or explaining it, smiling, laughing, maybe an increased use of hand gestures, and more fluent speech because they're competent in it, so they can more easily talk about it. So if someone is demonstrating any of these types of behaviors, that may be an indication that they are demonstrating a strength or working within the strength. But really, ultimately, what we need to do is actually have a conversation. So it's one thing to assume, just based on these behaviors, that might be a strength. But ultimately, what we have to do as supervisors is we have to have conversations. And the conversations, and I've put this in your materials or your handout if you've printed it out, these 4 questions, these are really good at getting to it. And so, the dialogue with someone is, what's an activity and skill that you think you're really good at? How do you feel when you're doing it? And that's the key. It's an internal feeling. People know it's a strength because how they feel when they're doing it. So that's a key question. What have you been recognized for doing really well? So just finding that out. And then what activities or projects do you look forward to doing? It's funny because we're all different. And for me, math or accounting or anything like that, anything to do with numbers would not be a strength. But give me a presentation or a speech, I'm all about that. And so it makes me laugh when I think about having to put together numbers. I'm like, oh no. But you know what? Some people would rather do that than do a speech or a presentation. And so we're all made differently. So just because it's something we don't like to do, we don't want to assume, oh, that's a bad job, because there's probably other people that do like to do that stuff. And that's what's so great about getting to know the strengths of your employees, that just because we look at a job and think, oh, that anybody would hate doing that, that's not necessarily the case. You can find people among your employees that do like doing that stuff. And if you can get people put in spots or doing things that they really like to do, plus getting the work done as a group, that's a win-win for everybody. So these are 4 key important questions when you're having a strength dialogue with someone, to really try to get at where they are. Another thing I would mention is maybe your observation. So something like, hey, I see you're fantastic at putting that report together. Is that something you like to do? So, something along those lines, so you could check your assumptions. Again, because just because someone's good at it doesn't necessarily mean that's a strength. So what do we do as managers, as supervisors, as leaders when we're trying to focus and lead through strengths? Obviously, we need to know ourselves, okay, first. We need to know our strengths. We need to be self-aware. But then when we're trying to highlight employee strengths and utilize those things, we first need to recognize and provide positive feedback for the job when they're demonstrating the strengths. So sometimes people just think, because strengths can be so inherently just built into our, who we are, we don't even recognize that it's a strength. We just think, oh, isn't everybody like this? So sometimes it's great for supervisors to give that positive feedback, recognize it when it's happening. Oh, you've done a fantastic job on this. You realize, how good you are at this. So sometimes it's recognizing and pointing it out. So that's one thing when we're leading through strengths. But then 2 is, and I've mentioned this throughout this session already, is, give employees specific tasks that showcase their strength. Going back to that question, do you have the opportunity to do what you do best every day? You want your employees to say, yes, I agree or strongly agree with that. I have the opportunity. And so giving employees specific tasks that highlight their strength and help them to utilize their strength ultimately increases engagement, job satisfaction, and overall enhancement of quality of life. So I would like to, I have a couple other polling questions for you. And this is some really great information to think about as we determine why this is such an important concept. So the first one is, and I'd like you to guess the percentage here. If your manager primarily ignores you, what are your chances of being actively disengaged? So go ahead and guess. If your manager primarily ignores you, what are your chances of being actively disengaged?
Okay, I just launched it, and I'll give them a little bit of time to answer, and then I will let you know the responses.
All right.
Okay, it's looking like the majority have voted.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just give them a couple more seconds, and I will share the response. Okay, it looks like 56% said 87%.
Okay.
33% answered 55%.
Okay.
9% answered 40%.
Mm-hmm.
And 2% answered 22%.
All right. So the actual answer is C, 40%. Okay. If your manager primarily ignores you, your chances of being actively disengaged are 40%. Okay. So I want you to keep that in mind because I have another polling question for you. So keep that in mind. And here's the next one. If your manager primarily focuses on your weaknesses, what are your chances of being actively disengaged? So remember, 40% was ignore. So if you can go ahead and answer this one. If 40% is ignore, this is focuses on your weaknesses.
Okay, just a few more seconds and I'm going to close the poll.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the results are 57% answered 87%.
Mm-hmm.
38% answered 55%.
Okay.
2% answered 40%.
Mm-hmm.
And 4% answered 22%.
Okay. So the answer to that one is actually D. All right. If your manager primarily focuses on your weaknesses, it is D, 22%. Now you might be thinking, well, what the heck is this whole class about then? And that's not the key. Well, here's the thing. When I think about focuses on your weaknesses and it's less than 40%, I think about at least some attention's better than no attention, right? I mean, think about kids acting up. Sometimes they just want the parents' attention, all right? So some attention's better than no attention. But here's the key statistic in all of this, and one of the things that I really want you to take away is that if your manager primarily focuses on your strengths, you have a 1% chance of being actively disengaged. So with everything that was shared, all the information that was shared today on how to focus on strengths and how to get to know your strengths, if you're really trying to promote employee engagement and just employee satisfaction and getting people to put in that extra effort, taking that initiative, if you focus on individual strengths and the employee knows it, They only have a 1% chance of being actively disengaged, which I think is just a huge bit of information to take away as a leader in an organization. So those are the key concepts that I wanted to share with you today. But I also want to, at the very beginning of this, prior to it starting, I mentioned several books. StrengthsFinder, obviously StrengthsFinder 2.0. There's a Clifton StrengthsFinder for students. And then there's a book called Strengths-Based Leadership, focused specifically on leaders, but all based around the whole idea of StrengthsFinder. But I also wanted to mention another book, and it's called Standout 2.0 by Marcus Buckingham. So Marcus Buckingham was involved with Gallup. He worked with Tom Rath and worked on the StrengthsFinder with him. And then he wrote a book that's kind of takes the strength whole idea in another direction, where he kind of, instead of 34 themes, he narrowed it down to 9 strength roles. And so it's another assessment that you take, but it's also another way of thinking about strengths and helping you utilize your strengths. He talks about, giving you that edge at work. It's specifically geared for work. And so I would also recommend that one if you're looking to try to assess what your strengths are, or if you're looking to find a book that would help you determine, take this journey with your employees and help them determine their strengths, and then help you as a supervisor to understand them. Standout 2.0 by Marcus Buckingham is also another really great book. So with that being said, I'm sure there are some questions, but hopefully now you understand the importance of leading through strengths. Hopefully now you know how to identify your specific strengths and ideas for developing those, and then recognizing the strengths of others and having that strengths-based dialogue. So with that being said, I guess we're going to open it up to some questions. So we can kind of talk about, or I can answer specifically some questions for you.
Yeah, you have answered some of them already.
Okay.
But what other assessments are out there? I know, Christy, in some of your programs that you facilitate for us, you use the like the interaction style assessment. Are there others? And what do you like about the interaction style? And do you think that's a good assessment for for strengths-based leadership?
Yeah. So one of the when I do emotional intelligence, and sometimes when I do basic leadership classes, I do an assessment called the personal interaction style profile, and what that identifies is your comfort zone and how you like to interact. So how you like to interact and get and receive information and give information and that type of thing. So I think that's also good in understanding yourself. I think when we talk about strengths, or we just talk about self-awareness in general for leaders, any type of assessment you can take, whether it's Myers-Briggs or DISC or anything like that, I highly recommend it, because oftentimes what happens is, with the personal interaction style profile, we tend to want to use one approach, and it doesn't work all the time. And so if we're able to understand ourselves and what we're good at, again, it gets into what you're good at in terms of interaction and what works. But you have to understand that depending on the situation or the circumstance, you have to maybe change it up a little bit. Just like with strengths specifically, you can overutilize your strengths, and then it becomes kind of a liability for you. That if we're constantly overutilizing something and not adjusting, then it can also come across as a weakness, or it can be overutilized. And so we have to always be self-aware. I think self-aware is the key to great leadership, by the way. But that's a great question. Anything else?
Yeah, we have a few more. Does strengths-based leadership create a false sense of success with poor performers?
Okay, so that is a great question. Now that goes back to competency and setting expectation in terms of leadership. So yes, I mean, you can still highlight someone's strengths, but again, going back to what I mentioned about competency, if someone is not performing, then they need to meet the basic level of competency. And so if they're falling short of that, then we need to fill the holes, right? We need to provide the training, give them the coaching, that type of thing, to get them to at least competency. And then highlight the strengths. I mean, you can highlight the strengths along the way, but if they're really falling short in certain areas and they're not being successful in their job, then you as a leader need to be addressing those things as well. So you can't just focus on strength when someone is falling short. You know, if they're falling short, they need to at least meet that level of competency.
Okay. Yeah, the next question is somewhat similar, but it talks about when you're trying to get somebody up to a competent level, do you have any tips or tricks that will keep them engaged in the process and increase their chances of success?
Mm-hmm. So I think that's where the dialogue is so important, that, you know, so you're trying to get them, let's say they're on a performance improvement plan, or, you know, you're in the process of coaching them to try to get them to meet that basic level. I think the dialogue about strengths is really important because we can work some of that in. Or, hey, if you get to this level, then, you know, we can really focus on developing you and bring you around to that next level, or, you know, whatever their interests are. I think that's so important. You know, whatever they really like to do, you know, we can utilize that as a reward to keep them motivated and engaged, to show that you're paying attention to the whole picture of somebody, not just, you know, focused on, you know, building that competency, but that you're also taking a look at the big picture and what people really like to do. And maybe it's ultimately that conversation where, hey, this position, or this, you know, this isn't the spot for you, or, you know, maybe you'd be better suited in this area or doing this type of work. That also can be a very powerful conversation. But yeah, just finding out what people are interested in and what they really like to do, and that strengths-based dialogue can help.
Okay, great. I think we have time for one more. Are there any risks or downsides to using strengths-based leadership?
I think the risk is that that's a good question. I think it has to be authentic. I think it has to be authentic. You know, if we're constantly giving positive feedback and constantly, you know, focus on how great they are when they're doing this particular thing, we have to be careful of that it doesn't become just a generic positive feedback, that it's not too much, you know. So I think, you know, we're focusing on the strengths, we're getting them to where they need to be, and we're constantly growing. We can't be maybe stagnant in or accepting of, okay, so you're really good at this, but let's continue to grow and develop, and not remain, we want to continue to grow those strengths, I guess,
Right.
not remain stagnant. Yes.
Sure. Okay. Okay, well, that's the last question, and that does conclude our time together.
All right.
So we would like to thank you. We would like to thank you for attending, and encourage you to register for our next webinar, or Christy's upcoming programs. I'm sorry. She has 2 upcoming programs. She has Effective Organizational Leadership coming up on May 4th and 5th, and she also has her Understanding Emotional Intelligence program coming up on May 11th and 12th. Both programs will be live and virtual via Zoom, and you can register at the website on your screen, or you can contact us directly at 330-672-3416 or at your training partner at kent.edu. We can bring all of our programs to your organizations, both live and virtually, and tailor them to fit your needs. You can join our extensive list of clients and bring Kent State to your organization. We also encourage you to register for our next webinar on Friday, April 16th, when we will be discussing having difficult conversations with Kent State facilitator Amy Shannon. You can register at the website on your screen, and registration for that will be opening early next week. In this webinar, we will discuss how to learn how to prepare and plan to deliver constructive feedback, identify the proper steps to be taken during the session, know how emotions and certain actions can negatively affect the impact of the session, recognize the importance of setting goals and the method used to set them, and uncover the best techniques for following up with the employee after the session. For those attending live, you will be asked to complete a short survey so we can be assured that we are bringing you the most usable and relevant content possible. You will also receive a follow-up email early next week with a link to view a recording of today's webinar. On behalf of Kent State's Center for Corporate and Professional Development and our presenter, Christy Frieden, thank you for attending today and have a great weekend.